One more thing. Anthony Davis trade coming soon for the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe not. Nico Harrison did what with Dirk Nowitzki? And we finally learned about Michael Finley and that dreaded beer. Locked up Mavs, one more thing right now.
I'm not a doctor, so.
That's it. It's me versus the machine.
I don't know.
Satnam change.
Nice penetrating thrust to the middle.
Hot man, the hot player.
Wait. One more thing.
Fired up.
Yeah, welcome. You're still locked on to the Dallas Mavericks, your team every day. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member covering the Mavs for 10 years. Thanks for reading every day or making Locked On Mavs your first listen. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet $5. If you win, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app on anything. So go check it out on FanDuel.com to get started. It's a one more thing, a bonus episode of Locked On Mavs. You missed the episode after the Suns game. Slightly and I broke it all down, talked about Cooper Flagg, talked about PJ Washington, and there were no Fire Nico chants. But I do want to talk about Nico a little bit in this one because Mark Stein dropped a piece. One of those where you're just like, all right, every single line here, I could tell you that there's something that happened, something new that I learned about the Mavs and the organization and all that. So I'm just going to go through some of the things that I thought that were notable from this piece from Mark Stein on his Substack, which is just a must for every single Mavericks fan to subscribe to. We'll talk about the search for the next GM. We'll talk about Nico Harrison, a couple of things we learned about him, and then Michael Finley and the beer. We learned one very crucial piece of information about Michael Finley and the beer that he took from Luka. So we'll talk about that. Let's start here. Mark Stein reports there's no belief yet that Anthony Davis will try to force a trade post Nico, but the Mavs will work with Anthony Davis. So the suggestion is that there is nothing imminent that Anthony Davis is like, all right, Nico is gone, so I have to request a trade, that I'm out. It seems like Anthony Davis is still going to be here, and that would be the first thing. The first thing that could happen is Anthony Davis goes, all right, you got rid of my guy that brought me in, that was the vote of confidence for me, that traded Luka Doncic for me, that believed in me that much. I'm out. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And then he could just sit out and ask to be traded, and that could be the thing that springs all of this into action. And honestly, we put the Mavericks in a situation like the Heat were in with Jimmy Butler, like so many teams have been, where you're just like put in a position where the player is holding the team hostage. And that's not a position of power at all for the Mavericks. The Mavericks right now, if they want to trade Anthony Davis, and it's not him coming out and saying, I want to be traded, if it's them saying that, then the Mavs can say, well, we can just hold him. He's not demanding a trade. He's not sitting out or anything like that. We can hold on to him. We got him under contract for 2 more years after this one. So we don't have to take your dumb offer right now. Now, hopefully the Mavericks do something like that because that's what it would have been great with the Luka trade, but that didn't happen. So we know that Anthony Davis is not immediately going to ask for a trade, which I think is good. And but they'll decide. According to Mark Stein, Patrick Dumont and AD's agent Rich Paul now have a relationship. They apparently met during the play-in games last year, and they've had a relationship ever since then. And so you're starting to see Patrick Dumont, like you'll hear a couple times in here, start to forge some of these like very crucial relationships that Cuban obviously always had, that a GM would obviously have. And he's starting to get more and more involved, which I think is what he's got to do right now because he's the one in charge. He's the one making the decisions. You got interim GMs, but Patrick Dumont has the final say, and he had final say over one of the craziest decisions in sports, and hopefully he's learned from that. But I don't think an Anthony Davis trade is imminent. If it had come out and said there's rumblings that Anthony Davis is considering, then I may be more like 5-alarm fire. Anthony Davis trade is going to happen. We'll talk about it. We'll speculate about it. Isaac and I will do a show tomorrow later tonight actually, about Anthony Davis trades and what they could do. But I'm glad hearing from this that there's no trade like on the horizon. Okay, we've got to do one right now. The next GM search is the one that I found interesting from this Stein piece. He said Mark Cuban is communicating with Patrick Dumont again, having a restored level of dialogue with Dumont in recent months. Cuban is again pushing Dennis Lindsey. So for the Mavs' next GM search, we talked about this a couple days ago actually. There's obviously some candidates, but Dennis Lindsey's one that's been in the building, was like an advisor here with the Mavericks for a year. He's now in Detroit. He's working with their front office. But he's one that knows this organization, knows the players on this team, made good decisions, or at least by all accounts and reports, helped the Mavericks build that team that went to the finals. And then he leaves, and then what? Then what happens? And there's a lot of you that have said to me, well, was it Dennis Lindsey the whole time that made all the best decisions, and then we thought that Nico was a good GM, but it turned out to be Dennis Lindsey? I don't know. We don't know the answer to that. You'd have to answer that with like, all right, how much of a decision was somebody's? Was it 50% Dennis Lindsey, 50% Nico Harrison's idea? You know, like, was it 10% Nico Harrison's idea and 90%? Like, who knows on that one? But there's 2 things that are interesting in there. That Mark Cuban is communicating with Patrick Dumont again. And Mark Stein saying again is not an accident. That there was a time where he did not talk to him or they didn't have communication. And so that coming up again to me, signals a couple things. One, maybe Cuban is the one that reached out, and Cuban was the one that's like, hey, I'm here to help or whatever, which, great. It seems like it's good that they have still a relationship. But two, it's this Patrick Dumont reaching out again. Reached out to Rich Paul, reaching out to Mark Cuban. It seems like he's trying to forge these relationships now and at least get contacts and at least talk to people around the league that have been around the team and that have a vested interest in the team being good. Mark Cuban still wants the Mavericks to be good. He still is a minority owner. He still wants the best for the Dallas Mavericks, right? Even though some of you may think that he doesn't when he appointed Nico Harrison and sold to these owners. I've heard all of you complain about it. But at least Dumont is making those efforts. I think that is important. Stein also reports that Dumont is going to seek input from Jason Kidd as well. Jason Kidd has a lot of power now in the organization. When Mark Cuban was out, like as the owner, we did this whole thing where we said, hey, Nico Harrison has a ton of power now in this organization. He has kind of like pushed a bunch of people out, and now Mark Cuban is out, and like he now has say over pretty much everything. And now that person is now Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd has, according to Mark Stein on there, the longest like extended contract with the Mavericks in the front office or coaches or anything like that, like on the basketball side. That is notable. So Jason Kidd is going to have a lot of say in who this next GM is, and I think that's very interesting that he also mentioned that. Coming up, Nico Harrison and Dirk Nowitzki. We've been talking about this the whole time, but it's finally reported. And Nico Harrison did what? Another thing that is probably going to make you more frustrated, but then we'll talk about that and then the Michael Finley beer situation. We'll talk about that on Locked On Mavs. One more thing. Next. Today's episode of Locked On Mavs brought to you by Wayfair. The holiday season is right around the corner. That means it's time to get your home ready for the holidays. Have you done that? Are you that person that gets your house ready for Christmas before even Thanksgiving? Drives me nuts. But my house sure has all kinds of Christmas stuff all over it. But the best part is that Wayfair has Black Friday sale. It's here to help make your space shine when you have people over or whatever. You're just hanging out, just want to enjoy it yourself. The best part, you don't have to wait. Wayfair's Black Friday deals are happening all month long with up to 70% off of everything from sofas to spatulas, you name it, you can get it over at Wayfair. So you can get all that kind of stuff. Don't miss out on their Black Friday deals. Head to wayfair.com and you can go get their Black Friday deals up to 70% off select items. So go check that out on Wayfair. Wayfair. Sale ends December 7th on Wayfair. Also brought to you today by our friends over at Built. Everybody pays rent, or a lot of people pay rent, and it's annoying, right? You just pay it. Sometimes you can't even, you can't pay it with a credit card. You get extra deductions if you pay it with a credit card. So you can't get credit card points for it, which is annoying. And then you're like, I'm just paying towards this rent, and it doesn't really build anything. It's not building. You're not building credit. You're not building any kind of equity. Like, you're not building anything with this. But you can build something with Built. You can build something. You can build it. When you pay rent through Built, you earn flexible points you can redeem toward hundreds of hotels, airlines, a future rent payment even, your next Lyft ride, and more. But Built isn't just about rent. It's about rewarding you from purchases you make around your entire neighborhood. So check it out. See what you can get. See what kind of points you can rack up with Built. Turn your rent into rewards and start earning points around your neighborhood by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Again, that's JOIN, join, BILT, built.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure that you use that link to know that we sent you. Start getting rewards for your rent. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. It's the One More Thing, a bonus episode of Locked On Mavs, where we come and talk about the things that we didn't get to on the show earlier today. So we talked about the Mavs versus the Suns game, and now we're talking about this Mark Stein article. Some great nuggets and incredible things. Talked about the Mavs GM search. We talked about the Anthony Davis trade. Now, a couple things about Nico Harrison from this article. According to Mark Stein, Nico Harrison's attempts to keep Dirk Nowitzki engaged with the only NBA franchise he has ever known were, in quotes, to put politely, rare in the extreme. This was, I think, the thing that Nico Harrison messed up on the second most. The first one, you can decide what that one is. The second most was he ostracized or just didn't reach out to Dirk Nowitzki or didn't make an effort after pushing out people like Casey Smith, pushing out other people that Dirk liked. Obviously, the Luka trade affected Dirk in a very meaningful way. But that Dirk Nowitzki wanted nothing to do with the franchise was like a stain on this organization to me. A stain on this front office, a stain on the whole organization. You've got a statue. You've got a jersey retired of Dirk in here. You've got a street named after him, and yet the man himself, who still lives in Dallas, still has a lot of things that he does with Dallas. Like, it has nothing to do with the Mavericks at all. Absolutely inexcusable. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, and also Dirk, one of the most gracious people ever. You ask him to do something, he'll do it. Right? Like, insane to me. And so to hear this from Stein, that his attempts to keep Dirk engaged with the franchise were, to put politely, rare in the extreme. So he basically never reached out to Dirk ever, which is insane. That's part of it. You've got to continue these relationships with players. Mark Cuban has like former players all over the place. I see Sean Marion all the time. Rolando Blackman has a role. Brad Davis was on the broadcast for a long time. Like there's these former players. Derek Harper obviously on the broadcast. Like there's these former players from the Mavericks everywhere around here. And the one that matters the most has nothing to do with this franchise, is going to Lakers games instead of going to Mavericks games. Maybe that has more to do with his prime deal, but that is wild to me. That whole thing frustrated me second most. Second most. The next thing is that Nico Harrison recently pushed for Anthony Davis to return from injury early, and that's when remember when Stein reported that Patrick Dumont got involved in Anthony Davis recently? That was just like a couple days ago. And Patrick Dumont actually made a decision on a player playing or not, and that was the first time he'd really meddled in something like that or made a decision or came in and like dropped the hammer, said, all right, we're not doing this. He's not playing. Nico was the one pushing him to come back or encouraging him to come back. And that's another thing, too, where this is why we were saying it's time for Nico to go, because you can't trust a guy to have the long-term interest of the franchise's interests at heart when he's got this 3-year window, and one of those is already going down the tubes because of injuries, because of something that like this team is going through. You couldn't trust him to not make some kind of crazy win-now move to save his reputation, to save his job, to save whatever. And this is one of those win-now moves, is to push a guy to come back too early from injury so that you can save face or you can save something from the franchise. And that to me is classic reason of why the Mavs needed to move on and move forward from Nico Harrison. The Stein report also said this that I found fascinating. The Mavs and Dumont specifically want a GM that's going to get out in front of the public and address the public and address the media more. And Nico Harrison never wanted to do that. How many interviews can you think of with Nico Harrison? There's not many, right? There's been a couple here and there. And one of them, a couple of them after the trade, right? And so think about any before the trade. We had one. We had one on Locked On Mavs at one of the media days, which I found fascinating when I think about it. Like, man, there's not been that many Nico interviews, and we had one of them. And that's where we got the people forget about Frank, by the way, which honestly we probably ruined it for everybody, making fun of the people forget about Frank line so much that he probably was like, dang it, I don't want to do this anymore. These stupid kids. He did call Isaac a kid. But the Dumont wants somebody that's going to be more public and out there. And there are GMs out there that will do that stuff. You think about Sam Presti for the Thunder. Like, I talk to Rylan Stiles of Locked On Thunder a lot, and he says, Presti does this thing where at the end of the season he talks for like 3 or 4 hours. As long as media want to like talk and ask questions, and he'll answer things and sit there. Like, can you imagine Nico Harrison doing something like that? The most we got was that press conference after the trade that Dumont demanded way, way after the fact, which is just a weird whole situation. But that the Mavs want somebody that's going to do that is interesting to me. That's something you think about. All right, who are the people that have been public-facing? Who are the ones that have limited their like access to the public or whatever? Something to consider when you're thinking about this. All right, I've teased it enough. Michael Finley and the beer. Stein reports this. Also, the famed footage of Michael Finley taking the celebratory beer away from Luka Doncic after the Mavs clinched a spot in the 2024 NBA Finals. Meanwhile, never included a key element of the story. According to Mark Stein, the drink was returned to Luka Doncic, and the celebrations continued as soon as he was out of the public view in the hallway of the visitors' locker room in Minnesota. I have a second source that can confirm that as well. And nobody said anything about it until now. The people that were close to it didn't say anything. Apparently, somebody would have reported it, but nobody wanted to say anything about that situation. But yeah, the beer actually got returned to Luka like minutes afterward, like very quickly afterwards at the celebration, and it had nothing to do with Luka and his conditioning or Luka not getting a beer. He got the beer back, like they gave it back to him. Hilarious. I never thought that was a thing that was like, oh, that was a turning point. That was a turning point where the Mavs. You could tell that they wanted to get rid of Luka. I never thought that. I thought it was just a weird thing. Who knows what it could have been? It could have been a weird sponsor thing, like they're sponsored by Michelob Ultra, and it was a course. Like who cares? It could have been something weird like that, but it wasn't. It was something dumb like this. I found that hilarious, and so hey, at least we know. They also pointed out in the Stein article, and maybe this is probably a bigger conversation for later, that, quote, Michael Finley is also frequently described as the member of Harrison's front office team, league sources say, who voiced the strongest opposition to the Doncic deal at the time it was presented. This is one of two things to me. One, it's very good saving face from Michael Finley, who is now the co-GM of the Dallas Mavericks, that he put out there, hey, I didn't want to do the trade. But also, if it's true, then that means I'm glad that that person is ahead of the Dallas Mavericks right now, because that person makes more rash decisions and didn't want to do the most insane trade. So I'm glad that he is. If I take the report at face value, I'm glad that Michael Finley is in charge in some way, because he didn't want to do the trade, which is great. Learned a lot of things. We'll talk about more stuff. I'm sure Isaac and I will bring up some more throughout the rest of the shows. But come back. We'll have a post-game show. We'll have another episode with Isaac and I doing AD trades, all kinds of great stuff here on Locked On Mavs. We'll be here with you throughout the rest of the week. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs. Peace out.